Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Bits to Billions, the unicorn story. And this is a very special episode, and it's special for two reasons. We have the founders of the 100th unicorn of India, which was celebrated with much fanfare just last month. And what's also unique about Open is out of the co-founders, so I have Anish, Mabel, Deena and Ajeesh. Three of them are related. So Anish and Ajeesh are brothers, and Mabel is married to Anish. So, you know, that's quite a tight-knit kind of family that we have right here as founders. And we are going to be talking to them about the Open journey, their backstory and all going forward. What does Open do? Founded in 2017 by former PayU and Citrus Pay executives and serial entrepreneurs Anish Achuthan, Mabel, Chacko, Anish Achuthan, along with Deena Jacob, Open focuses on small and medium-sized businesses by offering them a business current account. Put simply, it offers a dashboard where SMEs can keep an eye on their expenses, collect payments, manage operations, thereby automating the entire bookkeeping process. Their next big bets include revenue-based financing, early settlement, working capital loans, and business credit cards to SMEs on their platform. Open is aiming to disburse $1 billion in lending through the new suite of products on the platform in the next 12 months. The company is also working on accelerating its product lines. Switch, its embedded finance platform, and banking stack, its SME banking platform for financial institutions, which is currently deployed at 15 banks in India. Over the next year, Open will expand its base to 5 million SMEs and expand to global markets like Southeast Asia, Europe, and the US. So, how has life changed post becoming the 100th unicorn? Has it sunk in yet, Mabel, Ajeesh, Deena?
It's still sinking in with the team, but yeah, the euphoria is now settling down, and we're back to active.
Back to reality.
Yes.
But the mood has kind of changed, right? I mean, just a few weeks ago, we were talking of 100th unicorn, and now everybody is just talking about layoffs and cost cutting and shutdowns. Tell us about what Open is seeing right now. Maybe Anish can go first, and Deena can chime.
So compared to last year in April, we had, I think, like more than 20 unicorns, and in May, probably after the 100th, we are not seeing like any more unicorns.
Yeah, as I said, you guys were the last.
Yeah, and then the market has suddenly like changed. A lot of this deal flow is now going into the very early stage. Things. But I think we have, I mean, all of us have actually, when you look back, we had seen this during this dot-com bubble times and then the recession times. So maybe like it takes 12 to 18 months for a course correction, because in the fintech or in this space also, like the way in 2000s, every idea used to get funded, whether it is like irrespective of like, the merit of the idea or like, how it is really related to those things. Then course correction takes shape, and I think 12 to 18 months, the globally also the things, normally like, the spirit of entrepreneurship or things, if you really look at universally, is that, okay, it takes time, but it will actually get back into the normal things.
Deena?
So in fact, from a external environment, if you see right now, there are so many uncertainties on the geopolitical and even on the economic scenario, which is playing out quite a lot on the entire funding part as well. So that is something which you, as a trend, you see right now. How long, how deep it is, we are yet to see in the grander scheme of things. So this, I would say that currently we see the sentiment to be extremely tight, which is also good in terms of that's where businesses are trying to conserve cash, get the runway really well, maybe cut back a little bit on discretionary spends and some of the growth plans being taken back. So these are the trends we are seeing right now.
Right.
So which is where I would say that it's not a time to panic, but this is a time and a reminder for us to say, how do you focus on the fundamentals? How do you get a great business running?
But a lot of startups are now talking about right sizing and layoffs and restructuring. Will you have to undertake any of that?
We don't really think that we would get that, because we have always been very conservative in that front. Always used to operate with a 150, 200 team, and it's the last 2 years is that we moved from this 150 to 500 as well. So currently, we don't really see like we downsizing the team in such a way that, because we're always like having someone like Deena on the finance side, we're always been very frugal in terms of what we spend and our burns basically. So I don't think we'll get into that downsizing, at least for us, and we have enough cash flow even from the last Series C round itself.
Right. And interestingly, this is your 5th startup.
Right.
So you're like a 5x entrepreneur. And this is your 4th startup together.
Right.
So how's it like? I mean, many husbands and wives choose not to work with each other because, there's a clash of wills and opinions. And you guys have done 4 startups together. How does the balance and equation work between both of you? Who gets his or her way most of the time?
It's not about getting our way done. It's always been about getting what is right done, and it could be either one's for that matter. I guess we did all our mistakes in our first startup, so thereon it's been we found a sync in our skill sets, and yeah, there are entrepreneurs who don't work with their spouses, but we found a lot of synergies in the way we operate. Anish is more the innovator, the ideator. I'm more of the operations person, put things to reality, get things to go ahead. Deena also fits into our equation that way.
And Ajeesh is the techie.
And he is the one who builds the whole thing. So as the 4 of us, our skill sets match in such a way that we just have our own independent niches that we operate, and a shared vision among us to drive it to scale as well.
So who's the moderator when there's a fight between the founders?
We've never had such a fight between the founders. We kind of agree on most things because that's how this team has worked.
So agreeing in such a way that maybe it's not that agreeing to that particular point, but then for example, if it's anything related to finance, or for example some forte which Deena leads, or in terms of marketing, then we trust that that person should have the final call on that.
Right. And Anish, you have a very interesting backstory. So, I have read different versions of it. Some people say you dropped out after 10th. Some people say you dropped out after 12th and you ran away from home and you kind of started up when you were 16 or 17. Tell us the story. How did it all begin?
So I'm not going to actually come and clarify on
Why? It's a good story.
So I think I was always like, I grew up, always wanted to become a journalist. So at the very age of, when I was in 2nd standard, 3rd standard, keeping a tab on the newspapers. And later when the internet came up, because I was also one of the first to actually, at the age, in 9th standard, I set up my own website. So I got fascinated by the internet and thought like internet is a good medium for, to make me close to the world of journalism. I started a portal called IndiaFirst.net, and that's when, I moved to Trivandrum, which is like...
This was after your 10th?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I moved to Trivandrum, which is like 300-400 kilometers away from where I was. It was really tough because I thought like since I grew up in tier 2 or a smaller town, that's the reason why people don't really understand about .coms and the internet. And I was always inspired by this Hotmail story of Sabir Bhatia. But then when I reached Trivandrum is when I realized that, okay, it's not about the small town or those things. Probably this was very nascent for the internet. So initially I had to stay for a few years in a temple, and I used to spend time in the railway station. And I had got my few other friends who was my co-founders. They were actually going to college.
Yeah, in fact, I read somewhere that you used to eat food at the temple, the free
so
food.
The good part was that the temple used to have a free thali, like these things. So food was taken care. Mostly the stay is also taken care, basically. And that's when later this got acquired by the Asianet. So I moved to Asianet, and that's how from 2005.
The other startups kind of happened, startup 2, 3, 4, 5. But Ajeesh, you didn't want to follow him to outside the house. You ended up doing a full-fledged engineering degree.
Right. So I completed. So someone should complete one of the degrees in the house. So I was that guy who did that. I did my engineering final year. I had a startup, and then I was more inclined on the tech side of it more than the business side of it. So then joined with Anish around 2013-14 times.
Right. Anish, you've exited 4 startups. Open, do you think will be like your most enduring kind of enterprise, or or are you a serial entrepreneur who founds, scales, and then exits?
So I never really wanted to, the serial entrepreneur is like, it happened probably like in the startups where probably you couldn't take it alone. So that's where like probably you got sold or you got acquired, or sometimes you have to shut it down. But I always wanted to actually build a brand, stick to that. That is
Do you think Open can be that?
I think Open can be. So the Open is for me the biggest, I would not say success, the biggest experience for me as a startup, or to the level in which we had actually grown. And Open started with that vision to build a global fintech brand from India. So right from day one, whether we name it as Open, the culture, the way we brand ourselves, that has always been like based on the learnings, and that's what the aspiration is. So I feel like Open, like the way I always used to follow these brands like Stripe, and Square in the US. So that's the aspiration, when it comes to Open for me.
So it can be like a more enduring kind of enterprise. But in terms of the problem itself that you're trying to solve, right, which is to become this one bookkeeping app, lending app for small and medium enterprises in India. Do you think that problem, still has, still needs solving? Because if you look at the last 10 years, whether it's HDFC Bank, whether it's ICICI Bank, they have significantly invested in digital. They've partnered with players like Zeta. So do you think Open will still have a case? Because, you will just be one of their channels.
So primarily, we started Open to solve for the challenges businesses face when it comes to business banking. So the current challenge is that, let's say if I'm an entrepreneur today, I have to raise invoices to my client. I am using a separate system. For my accounting, I have to use an accounting software. Payroll, I'm using a separate software. Now, this systems doesn't talk to each other. And if the systems talk to each other, then you can automate accounting. Because if I know that, okay, this 100 rupees coming from Mabel and 5 rupees that is going out is for a salary payment for Ajeesh, I can automate income and expenses. So that's how we got started. Now, while banks have started the digital transformation, a lot of banks are launching neobanks, our strength have always been, even globally compared to some of our peers, our strength has been building this financial OS which integrates with each other. So the moment like you make a payment out to a vendor, automatically the TDS gets calculated and you can do a TDS payment, automatically preparing your balance sheet and profit and loss. So that's a strength where probably a non-vendor, because banks normally depend on a traditional legacy vendor for developing their neobank. And this also requires a lot of constant feedbacks from your customers to build on. So what we have built on the last 4 years, today we don't think banks will, even though banks are launching neobanks, they're not going into this depth. And that's also the reason why we had created now a separate division called Banking Stack, where we sell this as like an enterprise solution to the bank. So all the 15 out of the top 16 banks in the country are currently deploying our solution to build their own digital banks itself. So the way in which we look at it is like, there could be ways in which we acquire customers directly, or it could also be that, okay, our software powers some of the other banks where the bank will acquire the customers through our platform as well. And in terms of competition globally as well, we are not seeing like anybody who's actually building this entire financial OS. They'll be building digitalization, better user experiences on the SME side of it. So that's what one area where our strength and the USP is.
And Deena, you are sort of the only non-family co-founder. How did you kind of get along with the rest? Was it easy, or did it happen over a period of time?
I think the whole decision to come together was also one of the fundamental things where the connect we had when we connected first and over the years, right? Though initial time, the first relation we had was more like a client and a service provider at that point in time, but the high came wherein they were the only ones who could, as the previous startup, they were the only ones who could actually give us some sort of delightful solution for a new age business we were running during the Taxi for Sure days, in fact. And that time onwards, the height of respect in terms of what this team can do was always there. And then there was a personal connect as well. And I believe that led to the whole thing of, because these are some of the decisions which when I made any of the career decisions, any of the things that I need to do, I'm a person who follows my heart. I would love to follow my heart wherever possible, like unless there is something which really holds you back.
How would you respond to, criticism or observations that in open, there's too much of concentration of power between the co-founders, of which 3 are part of the family, that, decisions are concentrated there, the most powerful decisions. Are you building a second layer of leadership at all?
Right. So right from the beginning, one of the focus has always been to actually build a next set of leaders. And if you look at Open also, when we started, the initial set of people are the people whom we have actually worked together in the previous organizations. And then at each and every stage, because the way in which you run a company at a Series A level versus Series B and C are different. So during the course of time, we had actually looked at and started looking at bringing up people who are people who are from experienced people, 15 years, 20 years, who had actually managed the scales onto that part and grooming them. And also today, if you look at some of these verticals like Switch or banking stack, it runs on its own, because as founders, for example, I don't involve on Switch. It's actually like a small startup team. Or the other example is we had a project called Open Book. Now it is being moved to a new joint venture with IFL. It is actually brought in by a 15-member team, which actually run it like a startup, where we are acted more like investors in providing the support system. So creating a startup within a startup, creating the squads, that has been at least from the first 12 months onwards, we had actually created that culture. And that's the way in which people are also getting accountable. For example, in case of Open Book, they have got they have to get everything right, from creating the advertisement to the product to the business plans to getting the approvals kind of a thing. So that's a culture which we had actually set.
So it's not like everything is concentrated
No.
at the top. Ajeesh, you know him as a brother, you know him as an entrepreneur. How the 2 personas different or similar?
As an entrepreneur, I respect what he is, but not as a brother.
You have no choice. He's the CEO. You're the CTO. You have to respect him.
Right. So as a brother, I think we didn't have too much of working relationship previously, right? So just after we get together, I came to know that he's a great entrepreneur, but he had been very good in following his dreams from early day. I used to see him, every day, right? What he is struggling, going through, and all those things. So, but
has he changed?
He has changed, but not as a brother, maybe, but as an entrepreneur, he has scaled a lot, and he has become really big.
So Anish, I was asking you about the macro challenges on whether SMEs need such a service. I also want to ask you about the digital public goods that India itself has created. For example, they have an open credit enablement network, OCEN. So will that also be a challenge to what Open is offering?
I don't think even OCEN will be a challenge or models like that will be a challenge for Open, because what we're trying to do is becoming a unified financial OS for an SME, trying to bring his accounting, his account receivables, payables, everything put together in a single platform, and this based on that, again giving credit on top of that. If you look at OCEN also, it's also trying to actually embed lending into third-party platforms, which has a huge ecosystem, which is also just another one part of what we are actually trying to do. So we don't really see that as a direct overlap on what we are trying to do. In fact, we will also be collaborating with, in fact, we are in the initial days, we are also in one of the initial partners working with the OCEN to embed financial services into the different existing aggregators or the platforms.
Right. One other thing is valuation-wise, you're $1 million. Unicorn status. When do you see revenues catching up with your valuation? Because there is a perception that your revenues are not scaling as much as they should. I think for the previous fiscal, you had revenues of 15 crore, losses of 65 crore. How are you going to improve your revenue numbers?
So from the last 1 year, because the initial 3 years of the platform, we are actually building up the platform, trying to get the banking partnerships, offering the we didn't we didn't had any monetization rails built into it. It's the last 12 months, the last April onwards, we started building the monetization rails, and then revenues have actually gone increased by around 10-20x basically as we speak. Our enterprise revenues have started actually kicking up, where we are deploying solution for the banks, the enterprise solution for the deployment for the banks. The embedded finance revenues have actually started kicking in. So now we are actually on a very stable path in terms of the revenue rails getting activated, and there is a lot more monetization rails getting activated, like for example the lending or the newer revenue streams getting. So in the next 2 years is what we actually expect this to be like in a break-even kind of a situation. And I think with the kind of like enterprise segment we are in, where we are actually trying to offer this as like a new age financial advice for the banks on the enterprise segment itself, and especially growing outside the market, which we have right now 2 clients basically. We expect that in the next 2 to 3 years is what we will be, we will be seeing substantial revenues basically from the line.
Anish, also in terms of the cost of customer acquisition and retention, how you're planning to improve those metrics?
So today, actually, one of our customer acquisition cost is one of the lowest in the B2B segment, which we are operating, which is around $3 to $4, because we use a lot of organic channels, content, and other means to acquire these customers. Because if you look at today, we are onboarding around 120,000 SMEs or small businesses every month on the platform, compared to probably what a banks, which is doing like a 30,000 or 40,000 customers every month. Now, this will we will see this increasing a little bit from the $3 to $4, maybe it will go to $5 to $6, but it will stay in that levels, because now what's happening is that more than our digital or inorganic spends, the organic spends is currently today at like 60 to 70% of our new customer acquisition. In terms of retention, we have always seen like a very healthy ratio of like around 55 to 60% of the customers active on the platform even after 12 months. So which is also comparable in line with our industry, especially with the banks where customers open a current account.
Right. So far, if I look at Open, Anish, it's about giving SMEs that one dashboard where they can do all their services, like the one-stop platform for CFOs. But the next phase of Open's journey is going to be about lending and credit, which is why you have IFL as a partner.
Okay.
So what can we look forward to? I remember a while ago you spoke about revenue-based financing, early settlement, working capital loans. So when do you see all this, getting executed?
So if you look at some of these lending products are already been experimented and tested in the market in the last 12 to 15 months. So we have a 30-day credit line for the SMEs to pay their vendors called Open Cash. We have an early settlement product for people using on marketplaces like Amazon. Now what we are going to do is that aggressively scaling this up. And the unique advantage of this platform is that it also helps our lending partners with a lot of data, because you have the data of their receivables, their payables, their tax, the GST, the taxes. And when they connect like platforms, like for example, if it's a D2C e-commerce business, when they connect their Google or a Facebook account and their Shopify account, then we get to know how much they spend and how much is the conversion, what is the sales happening through the methods like Shopify. So that's where it's easier to actually build a revenue-based financing. And for example, if we can give a revenue-based financing on a card for their marketing spend, which can only be used on Facebook and Google. So you can also control where the customer is actually spending the credit line that is being used. Or if it's for a D2C e-commerce business, which they connect their logistic provider, then we can give an early settlement instead of waiting for a 15-day for a cash on delivery kind of a model. Similarly, in the restaurant segment, if it's a restaurant which connects their aggregator accounts like a Zomato or a Swiggy, rather than waiting for that 7 to 15 days, an instant loan can be provided. So some of this we have already experimented with the select set of customers, and now with partners like IFL, we are now going to scale this up aggressively, and we'll be rolling out to all the existing customers on our base as well as to the new set of customers. So we can look forward for creating more niche focused lending products focused on each of this vertical. For example, I mentioned the example of e-commerce, restaurants, and for the larger SMEs, the working capital loans, the term loans. And the good part is also that apart from the traditional underwriting methods like the bureau scores and the bank statements, we have a lot more data to actually underwrite, and even early warning signals, because since we control the bank current account of the users, even after the loan is getting dispersed, how does the business spends that loan basically. So those are the these are the areas where we are focusing on the lending side.
Will you ever acquire a banking license? Is that your ambition?
So we always were very clear that we wanted to become a technology provider partnering with a bank, because getting a banking license is a different ball game altogether, the managing the compliance, the customers' funds. So we really wanted to focus more on focusing on the enabling of the financial automation on top of the banking, whereas the banking partner would take care of the banking services. But again, being in this neo-banking as a space, if this gets regulated, and there is a lot of talks generally about the digital banking, if that comes in, we may explore that as an option.
Anish, so you started up when you were 16 years old, and since then you've kind of founded, exited 4 startups. This is your 5th, as we discussed. How do you see Open for the next 10 years? Do you think it will again be a startup that you will exit, or do you think it will be a startup that's listed on the Lal Street perhaps? Where do you see the end state for Open?
I think for Open, the journey just started after 5 years, because there is much to do, especially on the enterprise banking segment, especially the way in which the SMEs are growing. And we always aspire to build a global fintech brand out of India. So right now, I really wanted to be with Open for the next 10 plus years. And the exit, right now, I'm not looking at the way in which how it will exit, whether it's in the stock market or things like that. But at least for the next 10 years, I aspire to be part of this.
What were the mistakes that you made in your previous ventures that you've consciously not decided to make when it comes to Open?
So initially, when I was doing an NFC startup in 2009, it was way ahead of its time, just based on research reports. You're building these startups. Or in case of 2013, when I built a payment gateway, developer-focused payment gateway, it was again before the customers was focused on raising investments. So those things basically were the learnings that when we started Open, we started researching a lot on what really customers want and trying to build for that things, and didn't build this product for the investors. Firstly, build it for the customers. Then picking up the right kind of people that is actually required to build. For example, every stages of the company, the early stages, you need a different set of skill sets. As you scale up, you need a different set of skill sets. So those kind of learnings we have actually implemented when we started over.
Do you come from a family of entrepreneurs?
No, my parents, my family, everybody is into government jobs as well as engineers and doctors.
So what keeps you going as an entrepreneur? I mean, there should be some factor that makes you want to start up time and time
more
again.
Than an entrepreneur, I like creating products, and you get the kick out of when your customers use your product, and you get feel the satisfaction of creating something which is innovative, which actually solve for a pain point. So that's what really, that actually gives the kicks out of me, and entrepreneurship is like a byproduct of that.
And does it also give you freedom? Because I noticed when it comes to a salaried job, you haven't been long in a salaried job in a larger setup. So are you most comfortable being an entrepreneur?
I think definitely I as somebody who likes to innovate new products, you would really like a freedom. But I had also got in certain organizations, for example, when I used to work for Citrus, they had given me the freedom to actually innovate, set up a unit. But I think you can't get it everywhere in all the organizations. So in that sense, I think entrepreneurship gives you the freedom to actually innovate and execute that your dreams.
Favorite city?
Bangalore.
Appam or dosa?
Appam.
Favorite internet entrepreneur?
Sabir Bhatia.
Vision for Open?
Global enterprise.
India IPO or US listing?
India IPO.
Favorite startup?
Open.
A bank that inspires you the most?
N26.
Leadership mantra?
Inspire more leaders.
An entrepreneur who you look up to for advice?
Amrish Rao.
What does unicorn mean to you?
Inspiring the team as well as more entrepreneurs.
On that note, Anish, thank you very much for talking to us on Bits to Billions. May you always have the freedom to innovate in your venture going forward.
Thank you.